Once upon a time, in a village nestled between rolling hills and a sparkling lake, there lived a boy named Ben. Now, Ben was a curious boy with an insatiable thirst for adventure, but some might say his curiosity often got the better of him, leading him into trouble. You see, Ben was known as the naughtiest boy in the village, and his favorite pastime was sneaking into people's houses when they weren't looking. He'd rummage through their belongings, taking just little things like buttons, string, or colorful pebbles, but his habit didn't stop there. Sometimes he'd even sneak into the houses of elderly folks, eat their freshly baked bread or sip their milk. While the villagers saw it as just the antics of an innocent child, they still scolded him and told him to stay out of other people's houses. But Ben never listened. He always thought he could get away with it. And so, he kept doing it. One day, Ben decided to sneak into the house of a renowned wizard who lived on the outskirts of the village. People whispered that the wizard possessed all sorts of magical potions and enchanted objects, and Ben couldn't resist the urge to take a peek inside. What Ben didn't know was that on this particular day, the wizard was sleeping soundly in his armchair, having drunk a potion that put him into a deep slumber. Ben tiptoed in, took one look around, and noticed a shelf filled with bubbling potions of all colors and sizes. Curiosity got the better of him, and he started examining the bottles. Suddenly, he spotted a potion that looked particularly interesting. It was a bright blue color and emitted a sweet, fruity smell. Without thinking twice, Ben unscrewed the cap and took a big gulp. It tasted like a mix of blueberries and honey and went down smoothly. He felt a bit dizzy afterward and started to lose his balance. That's when he noticed something strange. His legs were shrinking. He tried to scream, but his voice came out as a squeak. Before he knew it, he was no bigger than a mouse. In a panic, he ran out of the house and found himself in the middle of the village square. People were walking right by him, completely oblivious to his presence. Terrified and alone, Ben scurried away and hid in a nearby bush. As the sun began to set, he felt a pair of eyes on him. Startled, he looked up and saw a sleek gray cat with piercing green eyes. The cat slowly approached him, its gaze never leaving him. Ben squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the worst, but instead of feeling sharp teeth or claws, he felt the ground beneath him move. When he opened his eyes, he realized the cat had picked him up in her mouth and was carrying him away. They arrived at a hole in the wall, and the cat disappeared inside. Ben hesitated for a moment before following her. The tunnel was dark and narrow, but he could feel a draft of fresh air at the end of it, signaling the promise of open skies. With renewed hope, he wriggled his way through the hole. On the other side, he found himself in a vast underground chamber illuminated by countless glowing mushrooms. To his astonishment, he saw hundreds of mice scurrying about. It was a mouse colony. Startled by the sudden appearance of a tiny human in their midst, the mice stopped what they were doing and stared at him. Ben, still in a panic, tried to explain what had happened, but all that came out was a squeak. Realizing that they wouldn't understand him, he stood up on his hind legs and started making wild hand movements, hoping they would get the idea. After a while, an old mouse with a long white beard approached him. Seeing that Ben was in distress, the old mouse asked him what was wrong. Ben, regaining his composure, explained to the old mouse how he accidentally drank a magic potion and turned into a mouse. The old mouse listened patiently, nodding his head in understanding. When Ben finished his tale, the old mouse stroked his beard thoughtfully and said, "Ah, yes, the shrinking potion. It seems the young wizard apprentice wasn't careful enough." Turning to Ben, the old mouse said, "Don't worry, little one. I know of a way to help you." He explained that there was a burrow that led to the sewers. At the end of the sewer, there was a manhole cover. If Ben could push it open, he'd be able to climb out and escape the sewer. But the old mouse warned him that the sewer was a dangerous place, especially for a small mouse. There were rats and other animals that would love to make a meal out of him. Ben thanked the old mouse for his help and said, "I won't let you down." And so Ben set off on his journey through the dark and dank sewers. It was a long and perilous journey. He had to squeeze through narrow pipes and navigate through murky waters. Just when he thought he couldn't go on any longer, he heard the sound of rushing water. Gathering the last of his strength, he pushed forward and finally emerged out of a manhole cover onto a street. He had made it, but his adventure was far from over. The old mouse had told him that at the end of the sewer, he would find a wise owl that could help him. Ben knew that the owl would be his last hope of turning back into a human. Looking around, he realized that he was in a part of the city he had never seen before. Tall buildings loomed over him and the streets were filled with unfamiliar sights and sounds. Just when he started to feel overwhelmed, he heard a soft hoot. Looking up, he saw an owl perched on a nearby rooftop. With newfound determination, Ben started making his way towards the owl. As he approached, the owl asked him, "What brings you here, little mouse?" Ben explained his predicament, hoping the owl would understand. The owl listened patiently, nodding its head in understanding. When Ben finished his story, the owl hooted softly and said, "I have what you seek. In my den, I possess the antidote to the shrinking potion. It's a small vial of anti-magic serum. Just a drop on your tongue and you'll be back to your original form." Ben's eyes widened with gratitude. He thanked the owl for its help and said, "I won't disappoint you." The owl nodded, then swooped down and landed on the ground. It handed Ben the vial and said, "Drink this, little mouse. It will reverse the effects of the potion." Ben carefully took the vial in his paws and examined it. It was filled with a shimmering liquid that seemed to glow from within. He brought it to his nose and inhaled deeply. The scent was sweet and minty. Trusting the owl's words, he tilted the vial and drank it in one gulp. As soon as the serum touched his tongue, he felt a surge of energy coursing through his body. His heart started pounding faster, and his limbs felt heavier. Looking down, he saw his paws and tail disappearing. In their place were hands and feet. He was growing bigger by the second. When it was all over, Ben looked around and realized he was back in his human form. Overjoyed, he jumped up and down, unable to believe that he was human again. He turned to the owl and said, "Thank you for helping me. I will never forget your kindness." The owl hooted softly and said, "You are welcome, Ben. But remember what I told you. Don't wander alone in places you don't know. You never know what kind of trouble you might get into." Ben promised he would be more careful in the future. Then he bid farewell to the owl and started his journey back to the village. When he reached his house, he went straight to his room and looked out the window. He could see the familiar streets and houses of his village, and it looked so peaceful. He couldn't help but feel grateful to be home. From that day on, Ben was a changed boy. He learned his lesson and never snuck into anyone's house ever again. The villagers praised him for his good deeds, and he became known as the kindest boy in the village. And so Ben lived happily ever after.